Dorian lovers, Dorian savers, Dorian protectors. I'm sorry, I got it. Okay. Dorian defenders eat pear tarts. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. So Lorraine's over there eating a pear tart. Meanwhile, I'm like past the croissants. You know what I'm saying?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Booked on Fantasy podcast. We, Addison and Lorraine, are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today, we are diving into Queen of Shadows, chapters 22 through 27, and Rowan is back, baby. Woo!
Oh my God. As soon as I read that, I was like, Lorraine is going to be insufferable.
I'm pumped. I'm very excited about it. Mostly just because I wasn't expecting it. I didn't think it was going to happen so soon.
Yes, no, same. I remember we talked about this at the end of Air of Fire. I was like, okay, why did we work so hard for like 500 pages to like Rowan, and then he can't come back till magic is gone? As I said, I didn't think he would come back until it was gone. So I'm like very confused and anxious to know what's going on and why he's there. Because it doesn't seem like he's there under duress. Right? I haven't read ahead, so I don't know. But it basically seems like he was like, I'm tired of waiting. I decided to come. I don't care. Damn the consequences.
Yeah.
Is really what it seems like to me. So we'll find out.
It is getting a lot more exciting now. Addison and I were talking a little bit earlier about how we don't necessarily have enough to kind of see the larger plot yet, but we're getting a lot of really interesting character revelations, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
So
totally
putting it all together. As a quick reminder, we will be discussing chapters 22 through 27 specifically, but it is likely that references to all the books we've covered so far will come up. This includes Tab, TOG, Com, and Off now. If you haven't finished these books and you don't want spoilers, please pause here. Then come back when you're caught up. Otherwise, this series is brand new to us, so you won't be getting any spoilers for the rest of the series, but you will be getting plenty of unhinged theories. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have explicit conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. If you are reading along with us, then next week's Queen of Shadows episode will cover chapters 28 through 34. And next, with the holidays upon us, we thought it would be fun to do a Holiday Ask Us Anything episode. So if there are any questions you want to know, either podcast related or just for holiday fun, then please send us a text or an email with your questions. We've already gotten a few that we're excited to answer.
And they were really hard.
Yeah.
They were really
I was like, these were really deep questions. I
would
have to think about this.
No, I was literally joking with Lorraine. I was literally joking with Lorraine. I feel like I keep saying her name wrong. I was joking with her and I was like, I thought people would be like, what's your favorite drink? Hot chocolate. Ha ha ha. You know, and these were like very deep, thought-provoking questions about, fantasy books. And I was like, okay, I'm actually going to have to do work for this. Like, this is supposed to be easy and fun. But no, in reality, they're great questions. I'm very excited to think about them. But they were not as easy and, lighthearted as I thought. So
they
we'll
went very deep.
We'll take really fun questions like, what's your favorite color? We'll take those. Or we'll take really deep, thought-provoking questions, either or.
If anybody follows us on social media, send us a text. Whose lap instead of Santa's would you like to sit on? I have the social media post coming up about that on Instagram. So
it's very inappropriate. So watch for little looking eyes. Some of them made me blush. I haven't read all of the books on that because since we try to stay spoiler free, we don't read as many fantasy books as we'd like to in case we decide to cover them. So some of those, I was like, I don't know who this is or what's happening, but I would really like to.
Thank you, Goodreads. That's how I found those quotes without spoiling things for myself. Also, by the time this episode comes out, it'll all be posted. So go check out our Instagram for the Santa's Lap carousel. So next, Addison, where are we at with the Onyx Storm countdown?
All right, the day we're recording is December 9th. And there are 43 days until Onyx Storm is released. 43 days, that's nothing. That's nothing. We can do this.
We're so close. Finally, if you are enjoying the show, then the best way for you to support us is to leave a review and share with a friend. Or if you have any feedback about the show, then definitely send us a text or an email so we can make the show better for everyone. That is all for housekeeping, so let's get into the episode. We will start with the book report for chapter summaries, and then we will dive into an analysis and offer theories for each chapter. And finally, we will share our favorite moments. Addison apparently has some new theories and epiphanies to present, so I'm very excited because I don't know what they are.
As Lorraine always says, the mind-blowing, what is that emoji you always talk about?
Mind-blowing emoji, yeah.
The mind-blowing emoji. That's what happened to me when I was writing these notes. Hopefully I'll blow all your minds. Or those of you that have already read it, you'll be like, wow, good job. You figured out something that was so obvious.
I'm excited.
Me too. Me too.
With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
Happily. Chapter 22. A seething Chaol could not shake the rage after his conversation with Aelin about Dorian's fate, so he decided he may as well blow off some steam by going Volg hunting. After prowling through the sewers, to his dismay, Chaol found the Volg were gone. Still spiraling, Chaol found his way to Nezrin's house, and they had a real talk about Dorian and where to go from here. And let me just say, God's bless Nezrin, because someone needs to be able to talk some sense into Chaol. The two decide they will stay the course, but plot a new path. Chapter 23. After Aelin's successful and daring rescue, Aedion found himself in Aelin's apartment, and it was finally time for the blessed reunion we've all been waiting for. Aelin and Aedion, two sides of the same scarred gold coin, together again at last. After a tearful embrace, Aedion asked Aelin to tell him everything, and so she did. They talked and talked until there were no unspoken words left between them, except about that blood oath, am I right? And oops, we'll talk about that because, man, that was painful to listen to. It was then that Aedion made me fall in love with him all over again. He reassured Aelin that whatever she had done in her past didn't matter to him in the slightest, that she was perfect and always would be. And I literally wrote, because that's how it feels.
I love that. I know.
How it feels in my heart. After a few days of resting and taking care of Aedion, Aelin had energy to spare, and what better way to expend it than spilling Volg blood? Aelin, Chaol, and Nezrin went to the pits together where, surprise, surprise, Arobynn was waiting for her. He reminded Aelin of their bargain and in no uncertain terms told her the clock was ticking and she'd better hold up her end of the deal or the consequences would be swift and severe. Aelin gave the pitmaster the name Ansel of Briarcliff. Does that sound familiar? And picked her victim. Chapter 24. Aelin kicked the Volg leader's ass and made a good show of it too. As usual, Chaol looked on in horror and worried about what might happen when Aelin was released into the world, and Aelin with magic. Aelin made a show of breaking the Volg's neck, and when the pit boss called the fight, she beheaded him. After the fight, Arobynn made it clear in no uncertain terms that his patience was running thin and she better deliver on her end of the deal soon, or else there would be consequences. Chapter 25. Elide was in the kitchen washing dishes when Astrid paid her a visit and decided to do, well, whatever Astrid does best. I'm not really sure what that is, but the point being Astrid got under Elide's skin. But it had all been a clever ploy to see where Elide's true loyalties lay. Promptly after Elide's conversation with Astrid, she went to Manon's room to steal enough coins to bribe her way out of Morath as quickly as possible. But a jump scare for our poor Elide when Astrid appeared and asked her, "Are you out of your God's damned mind, stealing from the wing leader?" But wait, jump scare again. Manon showed up and demanded to know what the hell they were doing and told them they better start talking now. Astrid and Manon argue again, but this time it was about Elide and her importance. Manon dismissed Astrid and took Elide by the arm and led her to her room. Unfortunately for all of us, they were met by Vernon, whose intentions were unclear but definitely nefarious. After his departure, Manon gave Elide a choice. Did her blood run red or blue? Fortunately for us, Elide decided that her blood ran blue. Chapter 26. Aelin and Aedion stood on the rooftop of her apartment. And man, did the happiness and joy of their reunion evaporate quickly. This interaction was all about business. Aedion attempted to discuss the various issues facing them, including but not limited to 1, they were running out of money, 2, they needed an army, and 3, they had no money to pay for one. Oh, and that little matter of the blood oath. But somehow, Aelin managed to avoid actually giving any meaningful responses about any of these issues, probably because she's a master of evasion, and Chaol interrupted them. He came to tell them that the shadow market and everyone in it had been burned, and of course, he and Aelin had to bicker. Aelin leaves, and Aedion and Chaol have a brief conversation where Aedion tries to convince him that they're all on the same side. But as usual, Chaol has too much self-loathing to really hear anything Aedion has to say. An angry Chaol left the apartment, snapped at Nesryn, and then disappeared down the alley. Afterwards, Aelin couldn't shake off Chaol's accusations. Feeling a little guilty, she decided to find a Vogue and trace them to their nest. She followed him through the sewers, but it wasn't the man kneeling before the pool of water that made her breath catch and panic flood her veins. It was the creature that emerged from the water to meet him. Chapter 27. Not only was that creature creepy as fuck, but it looked like one of those creepy-ass gargoyles from the clock tower, and it had the fucking voice of the king. It's gonna be a hard no for me. Still reeling, Aelin left the sewers and headed for the apartment, where a seething Aedion was waiting. He was going a little stir-crazy in Aelin's tiny, albeit luxurious apartment, and Aelin disappearing for hours and coming back reeking of the sewers and covered in Vogue blood wasn't helping matters. The two bicker, but it quickly turns into a heartfelt night of drinking and sharing their war stories of how they got each and every scar. In a way, it was almost a perfect night, except for the fact that Aedion was so massive he almost broke Aelin's couch. After 2 more days of waiting around, Aelin finally took pity on Aedion and decided to take him to a seedy tavern. On the way, they run into Nesryn, and they invite her to come along. The 3 play cards, and Nesryn hands them their ass. Unfortunately, it was too dangerous for them to be drunk in public together. On the way home, Aedion's fey ears detected a single male's presence, and he stopped them. A heartbeat later, Aelin was running right into the arms of... Drumroll, please. Rowan. That's right. He's back. And Lorraine is over the moon. And Addison, well, she smiled just a little. And that concludes the book report.
Guess who's back again.
That works.
Back.
Tell a friend.
Yay! Wow, so exciting. Thank you for that book report. So let's get into the analysis. And per usual, we do have some overarching thoughts, starting with Addison's.
Yes. Okay. When I started writing these notes, I didn't really have anything. I was like, damn, I'm going to have to kind of, scramble to come up with something. And then I got to chapter 25 and I was like, holy shit. And that's where things started happening for me. So sometimes when I prep for episodes, I feel like they're just okay. I'm not trying to knock myself. Like, sure, my thoughts are good and entertaining or whatever, but I don't have any groundbreaking or earth-shattering theories or revelations. But for this set of chapters, my brain was firing on all cylinders. And I am so psyched to talk about everything. I feel like I'm finally starting to put the pieces together. And so just a little teaser, I have a theory about Astrid that I'm dying to talk about. And I, a little bit, have a theory, it's not necessarily a theory, but I'm starting to figure some things out about Erebin and Aelin and what's going on there. So I'm excited to talk about those. Speaking of Erebin, I feel this set of chapters demonstrates that Erebin's plans are starting to come together. To be honest, I don't have as much of a clue what his ultimate purpose is in playing this game with Aelin, but I am starting to feel like the threads are coming together on the other side. As I put in my own analogy, I'm starting to see the tapestry that all these threads are weaving, okay? And then this is the last overarching thought, but this is actually just something funny that popped into my head. So as you all know, we like shadow daddies on this podcast. I literally said that in the intro episode, okay? A lot of you have probably heard me mention Xaden Ryerson, who, for those of you who don't know, is a shadow daddy from the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. You should definitely check it out. A few weeks ago, we released an episode about the Onyx Storm excerpt that dropped in Cosmopolitan magazine. If you have not listened to it yet, I'm going to do a shameless plug here. You should definitely go check it out because we will be covering Onyx Storm when it comes out in 43 days. And for those who've been listening for a while, you know we literally count down to it in every single episode. So this is something so stupid. And so I hope you laugh because I thought it was really funny and now I'm worried I put too much pressure on the moment, okay? At the end of that episode, I said, Zaddy is home, like Xaden and Daddy, like as a joke. So when Rowan came back, I was thinking about it, and in my mind, I combined Rowan and Daddy, and I came up with Ratty is home. And now, every time I think about Rowan, I'm like, Ratty's home, and it makes me laugh.
Sound as good. Ew.
I know. And so it makes me laugh every time because it sounds gross. But it's so funny because I hear it every time, like, Ratty's home, everybody.
You sound like
I know.
some street urchin named Ratty.
I know. So it was just so funny to me. I think about it every time now.
I will not be adopting that. That's for sure.
What? I'm truly offended. How could you not? I told you it was stupid. That was a stupid thing I wanted to tell you yesterday. But I was like, wait, I'm going to tell you live.
Sounds too much like rat. The rat is home. Street urchin. Ratty.
I know.
Okay.
I hope that lives rent free in all of your minds forever.
For free.
For free.
Well, anyways, my thoughts are not that sophisticated. Basically, mine are just that I'm getting really tired of the same argument occurring between Chaol.
You got Ratty over here, Chaol over here.
I got rattied. And Chaol. Sorry. Because we get it. They don't see eye to eye. Please move on. Either separate or get on the same page because after 27 chapters, I've had enough. I'm tired. I don't want to hear it anymore. But aside from that, I am very happy that we get not one, but two reunions. Aedion's reuniting with Aelin and Rowan's back in the picture. And because it was so unexpected, I was like, oh, that was such a nice treat. And I'm very excited about Elide. I am so curious about what else the witches are going to figure out or like what else is just going on in Morath. But this confirmation of something that we had been speculating about, I was like, yes, I was just very excited.
Oh yeah, me too.
Okay, so that's it for overarching thoughts. And now we can actually get into our chapter analyses, starting with chapter 22. Based off where we left off in chapter 19, Chaol had just finished his watch on the rooftop after their successful rescue of Aedion, and he is still pissed, to say the least, as he takes it upon himself to hunt down some elusive Valga nests. His rage was due to Aelin's lie about trying to save Dorian. Chaol thinks Dorian wasn't gone, and he didn't give a shit how much Aelin trumpeted about mercy for Dorian, or that she said it was a weakness not to kill him. The weakness lay in his death. He is also fearful that Aelin's humiliation of the king would lead to increased activity from the Valg. I do understand Chaol's anger, but I think this really does come down to a difference in interpretation, or at least that's how I thought about it. Chaol believed that saving Dorian meant getting him out of the castle and free of the collar, while Aelin's interpretation of saving him meant releasing his soul from imprisonment by the Valg. Neither are necessarily wrong, but both believe very strongly that their idea is the right path. But I will continue to say, I do want Dorian to be rescued. I do not want him to be killed.
That's fair. I agree on both accounts. I also want to point out here that Aelin and we as readers know how horrible Dorian's fate is because of Aelin's personal experience with the Valg princess in Wenlin. Chaol does not have the ability to empathize in that way because of his lack of experience and exposure to even comprehend the horrors going through. So, as you said, neither are wrong. It's just a difference of perspective, really. Chaol also goes on to think after this, the weakness lay in his death. That's what he should have said. The weakness lay in giving up. And I think this thought is really indicative of his mentality. We discussed this in a previous episode, so I won't rehash my whole spiel here. But saving Dorian and seeing him put on the throne is Chaol's path to redemption from being a quote-unquote liar, oathbreaker, and traitor. And we've talked about this a bunch, so I don't want to rehash it again. But I think there's a variety of reasons that he is desperate to save Dorian. He loves him. It's like his brother. But it's his path to redeeming himself. And as we'll talk about later, Chaol's self-loathing is off the charts. He is really, truly putting all of his eggs in the Dorian basket. You know what I'm saying?
That's true. I guess now that you bring this up, and I didn't think about it until now, though, I'm not saying this because I'm like, rah, Chaol is bad or whatever, but in the idea that it's his path to redemption is kind of a selfish take, I guess, in the sense that as we see later, Dorian had wished to be killed, right?
Yeah.
Kind of that.
He has a brief chapter after Aelin doesn't behead him.
Yeah.
His internal thought is he wished she would have killed him and he hated her for not doing it.
Right. And so one perspective to also take is, what does Dorian want? Right. We see that Dorian's still trapped in there. I'm only bringing this up because it's a perspective that we haven't necessarily considered yet. I think we've looked at Aelin's motivations, we've looked at Chaol's motivations, but Dorian is still in the Valg. And nobody knows that he's in there. Aelin and Chaol seem to both have their own ideas of what they think is best for Dorian, but Dorian is still there. So it's not like we can like forget about what Dorian himself wants, even if it is not necessarily an outcome that I, as a reader, would want for him either.
Right.
I don't know. That just sprung up in my head.
But then I'm sure if you could tell Dorian whatever way, there's a way to save you, he'd be like, well, fuck yeah, get this thing off me and save me. You know what I mean?
True.
So it's
yeah.
But if there's no path to saving him in the foreseeable future, I think he'd rather just end it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because he's literally being tortured every day. So.
Yep. I also think everyone would definitely have loved for a more discreet rescue, but there was really no other way for Aelin to do this because the king knew she would be coming to rescue Aedion. I mostly feel that Chaol is misdirected in his anger. I'm not going to say that he doesn't have a right to be angry. I would be very angry if I were him too. But Aelin is not the central issue here. I just hope that he realizes that the scope of their operations have expanded like tenfold. It is not just about Rifthold. This is a much larger issue about like the fate of the entire continent and the world. The problem has evolved to become a question of, what do you do for the world, not just Otterlin? But I understand that that's not probably something that Chaol is ready to handle yet because he's just like in a panic mode. So
yeah.
Chaol also refuses to give up, and he thinks maybe we would keep Val commanders alive, see just how far gone the man inside of the demon truly was. Maybe there was another way. There had to be another way. I do, again, as I've stated multiple times, appreciate that Chaol does continue to believe that they can figure out how to save Dorian without killing him. I too hold out the belief that there is a way.
You still believe? I'm glad somebody does.
Still believe.
Ain't no hope for baby. I'm sorry, there ain't no hope. Not gonna happen. They're gonna behead his ass in this book. I did say at the end of Air of Fire that someone important was gonna die. I did say that.
You think Dorian's gonna die in this book?
Every chapter we read where there's not even a discussion or any kind of exploration into how to save him makes me less confident about his survival.
That's fair.
We're a third of the way through. And
that's true. Yeah.
There hasn't even been any discussion. Also, I'd like to point out at the beginning, the very first chapter about him that we talked about, he only has so much time before the Valg truly takes over. Like, he has that barrier, that mental barrier.
That's true too.
But every day, the Valg is getting stronger and stronger. So how much time does he have left, realistically? Sorry. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, that's a fair point. I was laughing because of her pear tart comment. That got me really off guard and I got distracted.
Well, it's a pretty good note.
Oh my god. Okay. Sorry, guys. This is probably going to be kind of a goofy episode if you couldn't already tell.
Yeah.
But anyways.
I'll tell you this. My notes are pure gold. Either they're fucking hilarious, like Ratty's home, or They're pure gold because they're brilliant. There's no in between tonight, okay? So buckle up, Buttercup.
So unfortunately, the Valg nests were now gone, and we see how much Chaol relies on the rescue of civilians from the Valg as a way to help him feel in control and useful. And I think that's really important because Chaol, understanding that he is a human being in a world where there are now lots of very powerful magical beings around him, I think him rescuing them and defeating the Valg is his way of just containing his own anxiety about how little control he actually has, realistically speaking. So, afraid to be alone with his own spiraling thoughts, Chaol next finds himself at the doorstep of the Felix home.
Also, this is what Lorraine was laughing at earlier. I am traumatized from missing it in the last set of chapters. So let me just fucking point it out here for everybody. Chaol is eating a pear tart. And so just go ahead and add pear tart to our permanent watch list because I'm very angry about that. It was very fucking stupid. Okay. And I feel stupid for not pointing it out. So as we know, Nesrin Felix's father makes the best pear tarts in all of Rifthold, and Chaol happens to be eating one. So just note that here. I don't know what it fucking means, but baby's eating a pear tart, okay?
I guess all the spies or anybody who's, spy, for lack of a better term, is a pear tart eater.
Dorian lovers, Dorian savers, Dorian protectors. I'm sorry, I got it. Okay. Dorian defenders eat pear tarts. That's all I'm going to say, okay? So Lorraine's over there eating a pear tart. Meanwhile, I'm like, pass the croissants. You know what I'm saying?
Wait, what?
Pass the chocolate.
But Chaol's eating a pear tart too, so how does this make sense?
Because he's a Dorian defender.
Oh, okay. I'm fine with that. I like pear tarts, I think.
Ew, enjoy your nasty little pear tart, okay? No, I don't actually know. I've never had one. So
yeah, I was like, how
I
did
don't
you
know.
I haven't had one either.
If you've had a pear tart, can you please text us and let us know how it was? Because
I feel like it would taste like an apple tart.
And where the fuck did you get it? Where the fuck did you find a pear tart? So let us know because now we want to have one.
Someday when we host some kind of live event, we'll make pear tarts, guys.
And chocolate hazelnut cake. Yes. Okay. Yes. The TOG ball.
Plan. Yeah.
Yes.
To get back on track, they debrief each other on the state of Aedion and the Felix workers. And though Nesrin steadily assures that they would continue their Valg hunt, they inevitably butt heads over the future of Dorian. I will say I appreciate Nesrin's character more and more as she continues to show up in the book in different chapters. She always remains calm and has an ability to think much greater than the immediate circumstances. And I think it's good that someone is there to push back on Chaol a little bit without judging him. But she questions Aelin as well, so she is basically kind of like a middle ground between them.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I'm starting to like Nesrin, and I feel like she serves two really important purposes here. First, she's meant to represent the common person who is against Otterlin's rule, right? Aelin, Chaol, Aedion, Dorian, Rowan, all of them have a much more complex relationship and investment in the world around them and what's happening. But Nesrin is a everyday common person, right? She's never been employed by the king. She only became a city guard as a way to protect her own family from the plight of being an immigrant in a place that is xenophobic and unfriendly to immigrants, and because of her own personal experience. So she represents the quote unquote common person and their relationship with Otterlin. I think it's really important that we get that perspective because all that Chaol, Aedion, Aelin shit is so complicated. They're too close to the situation in a lot of ways. And secondly, I really feel is that despite her history with Chaol, she can stay pretty objective and can assess what is best for the rebellion as a whole. Though Chaol and Aelin, for obvious reasons, cannot. And so I think she serves really two important purposes there. I feel that Nesrin proves that quite literally in the next paragraph on this page when Chaol asks, "Are they my friends?" And Nesrin calls him out and tells him that he and Aelin are doing their best to be anything but. And then even when Chaol tries to justify his behavior by saying that they can't be friends without trust, she points out he violated her trust by going to Erebin. And so I really appreciate that because Sometimes she takes Aelin's side. Sometimes she takes Chaol's side. And so I would like to invite Nesrin Falik to this podcast and get her to weigh in.
Bring some pear tarts to our live events, please.
Oh my God, yes. Nesrin also tries to help Chaol work through the Dorian situation by thought experimenting if he was really and truly gone. And Chaol's reaction is really intense. He gets very upset and angry, which we get. Okay, we all get it. But he refuses to even entertain the idea. He says, because then it's all for nothing. Everything that happened, it's all for nothing. You wouldn't understand. And on the first read, I took this as him talking about everything that happened with Aedion getting caught and Sorsha dying and Dorian ultimately having the Wordstone collar put on. And this comment specifically being about his guilt and his role and how everything went down. But on a second reread, I think it goes even a little deeper. I think that he's also talking about himself becoming a quote-unquote liar, oathbreaker, and traitor, blowing up quite literally his entire life and sacrificing his honor and loyalty, which is a core value for Chaol, would be for nothing. And so I think there's some double meaning in that. I feel like it's very easy to get caught in surface level Chaol. He's brooding, he's annoying, he's always picking a fight with Aelin. And I agree, it's starting to get old. But I do sometimes try to peel back the layers and be like, what does he really mean? And at his core, Chaol is having an existential crisis and a nervous breakdown, okay? His whole life has been turned upside down for, infinity reasons. He doesn't have the space to work through that because they're quite literally all in peril all the time.
Right.
So, not to get like super psychological, but his nervous system is in fight or flight 24/7. And your nervous system can only sustain that for so long. So poor kid. Right. I guess that's really true of all of them, but I gotta defend my baby.
No, okay. See, this is what I'm saying. I think there's a lot of parallel between what Aelin was feeling and what Chaol is feeling. Because Aelin spent so much time doing the same thing. Like she had so much hate for herself and carried so much guilt for feeling like she was responsible for everything that had happened to Terrasen. And I think Chaol is going through that cycle with himself because of his relationship to Dorian and his duty to ultimately protect Dorian. And now that he's failed in that, and as you said, his honor and his loyalty are really core part of how he views himself. When that part dissolves around him, Chaol feels all of that guilt because he feels that he couldn't do like his one job. He had one job to protect Dorian. Now he's like,
you had one job,
one job,
and instead he looks like King Prawn.
Yeah, quite
Y'all,
literally.
Lorraine is obsessed with that meme. She's obsessed with it. Please go look at it on our socials and like it just for Lorraine. It'll make her so happy. It's also pretty funny. I'm not going to lie. They're pretty funny.
It's just such a funny image. He's from the Muppets, apparently, but he's been circulating around social media very rapidly, mostly on TikTok primarily first. But it's just so funny, the situations.
They're so applicable. I was thinking one day, I was like, me realizing it's December 10th and there's 15 days till Christmas. I haven't even started shopping. And I'm like, I look like King Prawn. Okay. I look just like him.
Yep, basically. Anyways, after Chaol admits he felt it was all for nothing if they couldn't save Dorian and that Nesrin wouldn't understand, she says, you think that I don't understand what's at stake. I don't care about your prince, not the way you do. I care about what he represents for the future of this kingdom and for the future of the people like my family. I won't allow another immigrant purge to happen. You told me Dorian would fix the world, make it better. But if he's gone, if we made the mistake today in keeping him alive, then I will find another way to attain that future and another one after that if I have to. This is a point that I had touched back in our discussion of chapter 7. Chaol's personal relationship to Dorian understandably clouds his ability to be realistic about the true impact of what it means for the kingdom and beyond if Dorian ends up ruling while he is still infected with a Valg. I think Nesrin can understand Aelin's perspective because she has seen and felt what it's like to be ostracized by other people within a certain community. Nesrin, as an immigrant, has been rejected by the larger group in the same way that Aelin, as a magic wielder, has also been rejected amongst people, like humans. And everything quite literally that happened to Terrasen was to get rid of magic and equalize. And I don't know, whatever. The king is just a baddie bad in general. And I'm sure had all kinds of reasons for wanting to do it, like having his own power. But Chaol largely has remained unaffected because he has always been insulated from that as someone who is acceptable, quote unquote, within the societal construct that Aderlin's current rules have created. So he hasn't felt what it's like to fear for his own livelihood, quite literally, until now. I am trying to be patient with him, and I realize how quickly all of this change is happening, but I really want him to make that connection and understand how similar his circumstance is to what Aelin and now Nesrin, as we just learned, have already known and understood to be true and experienced for themselves. As Nesrin constantly tells him, Chaol and Aelin are not enemies. They have both now experienced horrible circumstances at the hands of the King of Aderlin and the Valg. And I think the sooner he gets on board with that, the sooner they can all put their heads together and figure out a solution for everyone.
For free.
For free.
I think that was very insightful. I think you're right about a lot of that, especially about Chaol's experience and how his livelihood has been affected. I think that speaks to Nesrin's own personal experience, as we previously discussed. But I like this in particular because in the last episode, I posed the question, really, what are Nesrin's motivations for risking her life and the life of her family? And now we've gotten a little bit of insight, so we know what her motivations are. And so I do like that we're starting to develop her character more. I still hate the way she was introduced. I still think that was bullshit. But I am warming up to her. I really am. I'm never going to let it go. I'm never going to let it go.
It was a little bit of a weird
character assassination. Yeah. I hate it. Okay. That's some Athril Goldring shit. Okay.
Oh my gosh. I also like that she tells them, I became a city guard because not a single one of them came to my aid the day the other school children surrounded me with stones in their hands. Dorian Haviliard offers a better future, but the responsibility also lies with us, with how common people choose to act. Agreed, Nesrin.
Yes.
This was another thing that I feel like I had mentioned in our Chapter 7 discussion. The entire system of how Aderlin rules needs to be changed for the better. But laws alone cannot enforce change. It requires efforts from, everyday people on a social level as well to decide to agree on those laws and rules and change the way that they interact with each other on a daily basis. So,
I feel like in reality, you can look to those lessons all the time. I mean, in the United States, we passed a lot of laws banning segregation, and it was not socially well received despite laws being changed.
Right.
So you're right. It really has to start from the top down or the top bottom up. I'm not sure. It needs to start and go everywhere for it to be sustainable change. But I like that she specifically calls out with how the common people choose to act, because as we just talked about, Nesrin is representative of the common person in the rebellion as opposed to like Aedion, Chaol, etc. So, yeah.
Yes. Yep. By the end of their conversation, Chaol's mood has shifted and he agrees that he will stay the course but plot a new path. He could do that. He could try it at least. I think, as we've continuously discussed, these conversations with Nesrin are especially important because Nesrin is another regular human. And the commonality of being of the same, quote unquote, power in a place where both regular humans and magical ones exist, I think allows Chaol to kind of let his guard down a little bit and absorb a different perspective because he understands that she is human as well. They have that similarity between them.
Yeah, that's a really insightful thought, and I agree. On a less thought-provoking and much more shallow note, I felt there was a tiny bit of flirting between Nesrin and Chaol, and I wonder if that is a smidgen of foreshadowing that they may actually become truly romantically involved. Chaol asked, "You actually admit to liking me?" And she says, "Did last summer not tell you enough?" And I was like, oh, okay. So maybe it's nothing, but I don't know. It's not like a burning, passionate romance, but it may be one of mutual understanding and respect. And I do think they're both attractive. And I think obviously there's some physical attraction there. So we'll see. I'm curious to see if that blossoms into something more real.
Okay, that ends chapter 22. Moving on to chapter 23.
In this chapter, we finally get Aedion and Aelin's reunion. We've talked about this moment for so long, and I was so happy we finally got it. Of course, I'll leave it to Aelin for her first real words to him to be something sarcastic and arrogant.
I know, but I love that they have the same energy.
Yeah.
Like Aedion not only takes it, but also dishes it back to her. He doesn't like cower away from it. So I like that they both do that with each other and they're comfortable to be like that with each other too. So we start off with Aedion's perspective as he wakes up in a familiar, luxurious apartment, complete with a sleeping Aelin sprawled in an armchair nearby. The conversation that follows was really, it was just so touching because it was just so cute. And I feel like the reunion is how you always envision them to go. And it's like the picturesque version of how it should happen. So first off, I would like to say that I really love their sassy dynamic. Aedion is saying things like, "You're a little taller than I imagined, but no one's perfect." And Aelin's responding, "It's a miracle the king managed to resist executing you until yesterday," which is very intense. But they really are just very similar to each other, as is echoed by Aelin's thoughts herself. Also, we have another line that SJM seems to love incorporating across our multiple series. And that is the territorial fae bullshit line. The amount of times that I have read that between her various books, it's funny.
Oh my God.
So
no, that's totally a good catch. I knew it sounded familiar when I read it, but I was so distracted by them reuniting, I didn't even process it. But after I read your note, I'm surprised she didn't start calling him an alpha hole. You know, like,
yes,
honestly.
Yeah. Aedion is amazing, and Aelin is lucky to have his support again. Something I really love is that Aedion accepts Aelin in her entirety. The sassiness, the wickedness, the wildness. Rather than be scared of her or try to make her be someone different, he knows that to love her and support her means accepting everything that makes Aelin Aelin. And there was a quote where he says, "You are worth it. All these years, all the waiting, you're worth it." He'd known the moment she had looked up at him as she stood before his execution block. Defiant and wicked and wild. In the initial part of their conversation, I also found it interesting that in addition to the instant recognition he has for Aelin's scent, he also notices another scent entwined with hers, staggeringly powerful and ancient and male. Interesting. Obviously, this is in reference to Rowan.
God, how does he not put it together? How does he not figure it out? Like, he smells the scent. He even notices the cut on her palms later. And I'm like, you're not putting it together. Oh God. The Blitto thing is really cringy to me. Oh God. It's so awkward. I hate it.
Okay, but obviously this is a reference to Rowan. And you guys already know my speculations about Rowan's relationship to Aelin at this point. And I'm sure everybody can guess as to why I pointed this quote out. I'm not going to say that this is evidence for my mate theory, because it could be that Rowan's scent is extra mixed with hers because of the blood oath. But in general, whenever mixed scents are pointed out, it's typically correlated with a romantic involvement. Plus, when they do meet later on, it's so clear that they have missed each other in a way that felt much stronger than just being friends and companions. So,
okay. Again, we're not going to rehash the maid argument right now because it's not super relevant, but most of you know my thoughts. I don't think that's possible because of what we learned in Airfire. But I will say this did make me wonder. I'm not going to spoil any other SJM series, so no spoilers, but in other series, in general, in mating bonds, it is often described that scents are intertwined. And it's often a way that others can tell there's a bond in place. So it did make me wonder. But of course, as you said, we have the Karanom element here, which obviously complicates things. They did quite literally mix their blood and share their power. So I'm going to stick with my normal argument here that it's just the Karanom bond, and they just have this deep relationship because they went through something traumatic together and they help repair each other's broken souls, you know? So that's all it is. And I'm sticking to that.
That is fair. I also thought it was super cute how much he appreciates her doting on him to straighten his blanket and like fuss over him. So
yes, and I wonder how cute Aedion will think it is when Aelin is fussing over Rowan instead later. I don't think Aedion's gonna think that's cute.
I do have a thought about just like the way their relationship and their reunion is written right now.
Oh my god. Okay. Bro, for real, I almost Googled it. Okay, this is getting real Games of Thrones. Like, I'm getting a little nervous. It's getting a little weird. It's getting a little creepy. And I'm going to point it out every step of the way. Remember, I said that earlier. I'm like, they have to be me. I can't even. Okay, just keep going. We'll get there.
Okay. Yeah.
It's getting a little weird.
The descriptive language and like choice of language used, I was like, what are you trying to say?
What are you doing?
Yeah, what are you trying to do, SJF? It's like,
someone
are you trying to insinuate something? I don't know.
Caught that in editing because that got weird fast. Okay, anyway, continue.
Once initial reactions were over, they both disclosed everything that had happened to them over the past 10 years. When they are done, there's a quote I found interesting that says, they'd been forged the same ore, two sides of the same golden scarred coin. So I guess there's the literal interpretation of them both, you know, having golden blonde hair. But I don't know, something about that phrasing of just being really similar was interesting to me. I'm keeping it bookmarked for now.
Yeah, it stood out to me too. One, because it's so sweet. And two, I've seen on social media, especially when we were posting a lot about Airfire and I was complaining about Rowan, people would put in the comments, Rowan is a mirror of Aelin, and that's why they're so connected. And, you know, some bullshit justification for why he was horrible to her in Airfire, but whatever. But to me, it seems much more fitting that Aedion and Aelin are mirrors of each other or two sides of the same coin. Their entire upbringing is very similar. Their life experiences are very similar. They're both children of Terrasen, whose parents were killed, who had everything they loved ripped away from them. They've dedicated their lives to finding their way back to Terrasen. And so to me, it seems much more that they're two sides of the same coin or they're a mirror of each other. That seems much more fitting.
Yeah, I'm a little confused by that too. The point being, it's parked and I'm going to hold on to it in case there's something else that comes up about it later. So as we continue, this is where we start getting into the choice language here of SGM.
Weird.
As touching as it was, if it wasn't made abundantly clear to us that they are family and close confidants to each other, sometimes the descriptions of how they felt, it just felt romantic and overly intimate. Like when Aedion says, I could never be ashamed of you, and then grabs her chin, forcing her eyes to him, I was like, what? Like they're cousins. What are you trying to do?
I know they've got a lot of trauma between them, but still, that's weird.
I would never do that to my cousin.
No, male or female.
I wouldn't even do that to my sibling.
I don't even think I'd do that to my husband. Like grab his chin and be like, I could never be ashamed of you. I don't know. I don't think I would do that to him either.
That's like something you expect out of romantic partners in romantasy books. It's not something that you expect to see out of like cousins, or maybe I'm just reading a different realm of these books and there is a category of them that has relationships written like this, but
not unless they're kissing cousins, and that's what we're getting close to.
It feels like it, but yeah, anyways, there's another quote that I liked. It does kind of play into what I was just talking about, but I'm just going to ignore that and just read it platonically, and then it's kind of nice.
Did you say platonic?
Platonic. Platonic.
It's been so long since you did one of those. I missed it. I feel like we've argued about this one, actually. This is sounding familiar. We've never had the conversation about platonic.
No. No.
Well, okay.
Platonic. The quote is, "You survived. I survived. We're together again. I once begged the gods to let me see you, if only for a moment. To see you and know you'd made it just once. That was all I ever hoped for. Whatever you had to do to survive, whatever you did from spite or rage or selfishness, I don't give a damn. You're here and you're perfect. You always were and you always will be."
Which I'm like, oh, but then I'm like, oh, they're cousins.
Yeah.
I had another example that gave me the ick a little bit. I've said this in, I think it was mostly our Era Fire episodes when Aedion is first introduced and we get some insight into his internal thoughts. But the way they're written really feels like mates. It really feels too intimate. For example, this line, "No one could understand that instant bond, that soul deep assurance and rightness." You don't write that about two people and then be like, they're cousins. It's
I feel like there's something else we don't know about their upbringing or their family or just their relationship in general, because it's true. And Aedion's attachment to getting the blood oath first and foremost. I know it's part of it's like a traditional thing for Terrasen, but I'm like, why is it such a burning, it has to happen that Aedion gets this blood oath?
I don't know.
I don't know either, but something about it is reading weird. And there's a piece of information that we're going to get later that's like, this explains why you were reading it that way and why it felt weird. I hope so too.
Shit's getting a little weird over here, okay?
Yeah. After this, we changed to Aelin's perspective, who had gone to the vault's extra vial replacement, which was now called the Pits. Very creative.
Yeah, amazing.
We learned that Erebin had requested her presence there because it attracted the Val guards, who seemed to enjoy the blood and rage they could feel from the crowds. Chaol also accompanied her for backup, and with the hope that he'd be able to follow some of those guards back to their new nests.
I think it's also important to note all of them ending up here tonight played into his manipulation game to keep them all on a leash. And Aelin thinks as much. She thinks she'd been right about Erebin wanting Chaol here, the Vold clearly an offering meant to entice the captain to continue trusting and confiding in him. I think that's important for us to note as readers, but I'm also happy that Aelin is self-aware enough to understand when she's being manipulated and being able to make calculated decisions about, do I want to play into Erebin's hand? Does that serve my self-interest? So I do at least appreciate that.
Erebin finds them, and we learn that Aelin had supposedly been summoned to fight and gain favor for the owners so he could become an investor, he being Erebin. I think it's important to note that Lysandra is there as well, and her and Aelin put on a show of continuing to be enemies. Erebin seems to buy it, but per usual, I am suspicious of what he knows or suspects. So,
dude, same. Also, thinking about that time that you were like, every time you get a new character, you're like, well, I hope they don't die. And that's true. And my note here is, I'm worried about Lysandra's fate. I'm really worried she's going to die. But it's true. I'm just worried everyone's going to die. Okay. On a happier note, Erebin tells Aelin that a certain celebrated dancer was on a ship heading south with all of her dancers before word of what happened at the Glass Castle had even reached the docks. I was very happy to hear this because I was very worried about Madame Florine from the last episode. I really hope that she does come back and brings the art and music to Aelin's kingdom like she promised. I remember there was a little note about Aelin worrying that she wouldn't even make it out of the Glass Castle alive, let alone make it to the docks. And I was like, that's going to be foreshadowing that she's going to die. But I am very happy to know that she made it.
Exhibit A of somebody that you thought was going to die, not dying.
Hey, there you go. There you go.
So Erebin being Erebin, his second agenda was really about getting Aelin to hand him a Val guard through the fight she was about to take part in. Aelin proceeds to the fighting pit, and with the suit, the boots, and the mask, she knew she was death incarnate. And I feel like this is another phrase that SJM likes to use a lot. The
Absolutely.
Death incarnate.
Death
It's
incarnate.
been popping up a lot. Yeah. Interestingly, she gives the name Ansel of Briarcliff to the pit lord and then points to the Val commander as her opponent. Combined with the fact that Arabin tells her that he told the owner she was trained with the silent assassins, I am thinking we may very well end up meeting Ansel and some of the others within this book. I also wonder if this will get back to Ansel somehow, or if people in Rifthold know of Ansel. Probably not.
Probably not. No, I think it's pretty heavily implied that whatever happens in the Western Waste is like no man's land and nobody really cares about what goes on there except for the people who live in the Waste. So I would be shocked if anybody had.
I do kind of feel like it's going to somehow get back to Ansel. I just don't see how she could give this name, Fight of Valgard, in such a dramatic fashion and not have it filter, through the wind back to Ansel somehow. So
I hope we see Ansel again. I really miss the live a little Sardathian.
Yep.
Although, I guess it'll be a live a little Galathinius.
Yeah, Galathinius. That's
Galathinius. Yeah, I'm down for that.
Work. Okay. So that ends chapter 23. Moving on to chapter 24.
I actually have an overarching thought for this chapter specifically. I don't understand why she doesn't just snag any Valg, knock them unconscious, and then drop them off at Arabin's doorstep. I don't know why she's antagonizing Arabin in this way. I was totally on board with her not doing it until after Aedion's rescue. I get that. Why should she give Arabin what he wants before she gets what she wants? But she's clearly capable of handling the Valg. So it's not like it's really super dangerous for her or anything. I don't understand why she doesn't just do it. Is it really worth risking Arabin's wrath? I don't understand why she's toying with him, what the deal is. Just give him his stupid Valg.
I think she's waiting until she figures out more from the Valguards. Because later on, when she sees them, she formally decides she wasn't going to do that because she still had more she needed to learn from them. But I also think she's probably waiting to see why Arabin wants a Valguard specifically, because we really haven't gotten very much information about that yet.
True.
I want to know too. I want to know why he wants it and what he plans to do with it before actually handing him one.
I know, but there's plenty of Valg walking around Rifthold, and that's a pretty dangerous game she's playing with Arabin, because all Arabin would have to do is whisper in someone's ear and they'd know where Aelin is and Aedion, and everyone she loves. So I don't know.
That's true.
It's odd to me.
So in this chapter, Chaol is being the ultimate pouty princess as he watches Aelin jump into the pit. He was secretly grateful for a night off from Valg hunting and for Arabin's gift, though he wondered what the price would be. I am still just not getting how Chaol can take Arabin's help and not judge him as hard simply because it benefits him, and yet also still be so hostile and annoyed with Aelin. I think it's really going to take something, I hate to say it, but something really devastating to happen to Chaol for him to fully understand why Aelin is how she is and has done what she has done. Especially because I do feel like Aelin puts her money where her mouth is. Sorry, guys, you're going to tell this is a chapter where I was feeling quite sassy towards Chaol.
Yeah, she was, girl. Yeah.
And now that we're talking about it, I'm in a more lighthearted mood. So I'm like, why was I writing like that? I don't know. But
she was keyboard warrior. She was like,
I was like, yeah, I really was. So sorry, everybody.
I guess I'm confused by your thought here. I don't understand how Chaol accepting Arabin's gift and what that has to do with his annoyance at Aelin. I don't think I understand what you're trying to say. Help me.
It's just the fact that he takes Arabin's help and doesn't really seem to consider how awful Arabin really is when doing that. And yet anytime Aelin does something that he doesn't agree with, he quickly jumps to blaming her and being like, why would you do that? You just want everybody in Rifthold to die. You don't care about Rifthold, yada, yada, yada. He's willing to just do whatever. In this case, go to Arabin. And I'm like, okay, but see, Chaol, you're going to extreme measures currently to get your particular outcome, but you're still very judgmental of other people that are doing extreme things to get to their outcomes too. Does that make sense? This is probably not the best example, but it's just
that's
generically,
what I was gonna say.
It's like the whole rules for thee, but not for me kind of situation in a way.
Yes.
So
yes,
even
okay.
though he's very honorable and loyalty is very important to him, et cetera, we very quickly see that he is willing to make small adjustments to that because whatever nefarious favor he's going to get from Arabin helps him accomplish his specific goal.
Yeah,
But
he's black and white for everybody, but gray for himself.
yes, yeah. Okay, yes, yeah.
At first, I
Much
was
more
like,
straight
yeah.
way to put
At
what I
first,
was
I was
trying
like,
to say.
I kind of understand, but I don't. I kind of have to disagree. But I see what you're saying. It was a very roundabout way to get to your point.
Sorry.
But
yeah,
that nugget, I will agree with. I will agree.
that was a lot of words for something that was actually very straightforward, and I just couldn't think of how to say it. Anyways, I will acknowledge that it was very good of him to join Aelin this night, even if he was annoyed with her. So I was like, yes, this is the part of Chaol that I respect and I like.
Fair. I'm also happy to say in relation to Chaol that at least he is self-aware enough to realize he's being manipulated in Arabin's game, because he does think about that. And he's, to a certain extent, making a conscious choice to engage in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. The fight begins and Chaol watches and thinks she moved like a midnight storm. Whatever training she had in Wendelin, whatever that prince had taught her, gods help them all.
I did think it was a little funny when he thinks the Queen of Terrasen was in a fighting pit in the slums of Rifthold. No one here, he'd wager, would believe it. He was hardly able to believe it himself. And he's absolutely right. When you think about it, it's insane. Okay, it is literally unbelievable. The fucking lost Queen of Terrasen is in the fighting pits in Rifthold fighting a fucking Valg. Like, what the actual fuck is going on? So, he right.
Yeah. Okay, sorry guys. More keyboard warrioring. So,
oh
from
no.
my part.
I was just looking at my note I wrote. I mean, is he wrong though? So clearly I was not agreeing with your keyboard worrying. So let's hear it.
So Aelin's putting on a show, much to the delight of Arabin and the crowd. And despite the fact that Aelin is fighting a Valg-infected commander, in my own words, I said, Chaol has the audacity to think it hadn't even been a fair fight. Aelin let it go on because Arabin had wanted it to go on. And when she took that clock tower and her magic was back, what checks would there be against her, against Aedion and that Fae prince of hers and all the warriors like them? A new world, yes, but a world in which the ordinary human voice would be nothing more than a whisper.
Okay, now I remember I had this coming back to me. No, so I'm going to stick with what I wrote. I mean, is he wrong though? I know that you and I have had in-depth discussions both on and off the podcast about this, but I think it's a reasonable fear for Chaol to have. I'm not saying he should be afraid of Aelin necessarily, because we obviously know he has a lot of emotional baggage when it comes to Aelin. But the untold number of magical warriors out there that would have their power even further bolstered, yeah, I get why he's nervous. I do. And then insert every other bullet point of argument you and I have ever had in that quote. Go back and listen to QOS episodes 1, 2, and 3.
1 through 7. Yeah.
Just all of them.
Anyways.
If you're picking up Queen of Shadows here, you're going to need to go back and start at the beginning, because Lorraine and I cannot have this argument every single time on the podcast. I'm tired of having it. And if I'm tired of having it, I'm sure you guys are tired of listening to it.
This is true. I do get where he's coming from. I just feel like he's taking her help when it's convenient for him and then judging her and getting mad at her when it's not. And as far as both of them go, I mean, right now they're both going to end up indebted to Arabin. Chaol has now taken favors from him. Aelin has. And yet I just don't feel like he gives her a lot of grace at times for these things. I agree that the consideration of what will happen to normal humans when magic is restored is important to think about. I just don't want the solution to be like just because magic can do bad things means magic should not be restored or anything. So that's kind of like my main worry with Chaol's outlook on that. Also, like, to be clear at this particular point, it's mainly just been the magical people that are being systematically targeted and killed. Like, the Valg don't even care about the regular humans. And so I just, anyways, I had a lot of strong feelings, but I won't continue on with all my keyboard warrioring. So next, The Valg?
At the end, you wrote, sorry for the rant. I've just reached my limit with Chaol and his bitchin' at this point.
I have.
You
I
could
think
have
I've also
skipped-
been reading things that Chaol says in like this really curmudgeon-y, just like kind of voice. And I think that's probably part of the problem.
Like, it's always bitchy. It's always like, well, you did this. It's always very accusatory when I hear it.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Anyways, so in the pits, the Valg bites Aelin, and Chaol overhears the Valg say its name couldn't be pronounced in the human tongue, but it also reveals that the prisoners who weren't executed were taken to Morath. And he says the ones who vanished in the night, to do the gods knew what with them. Just as some world building, this signifies that the Valg have a different language that they speak amongst each other, and the language of humans is one that they have learned separately, I guess. Aelin then slams into the Valg, cracks its neck, and then severs the head with a blade hidden in her boot, which was kind of gruesome to read. I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
Chaol notices that the blood in the sand wasn't the right color, though no one else but the other Valg demons took note of it. The fight now over, Erebin is pissed that Aelin killed the Valg, rendering it useless to him, but Aelin assures him, don't worry, master, you'll get what's owed to you. And I felt like there was definitely some double meaning at play with that statement, and I definitely feel like Aelin is going to find a way to maybe avoid giving Erebin a Valg, and instead is going to make sure she gets her retribution for everything he's done. Or maybe she does give him a Valg, but just at the very end, when everything plays out, she is going to get her revenge on Erebin. So, in a much greater way.
Baby's definitely going to get a revenge. I don't know if it will involve the Valg, but baby's coming for him.
Mm-hmm. Erebin makes a play to assert some control by taunting her with the location of Sam's body, but Aelin brushes it off with a snappy reply. And just for some more world building, Aelin thinks not flowers, never flowers in Terrasen. Instead, they carried small stones to graves to mark their visits, to tell the dead they still remembered. Stones were eternal, flowers were not.
Yes, I also really liked the symbolism of that. The idea that you can give the dead something that won't wear away with time. I really like that. That stood out to me too, just as some world building for the culture of Terrasen.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to point that out. But I did also really like the symbolism behind it.
Yeah.
Sarah J. Maas has done a good job, even though we've never been to Terrasen, building up a cultural understanding of that place. And so, God, I hope we go to Terrasen. When?
We got to rebuild it first.
Well, I think we have to get there first. I don't know. We can't build. We don't even know what it looks like.
You're right. Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately, with another threat, Aelin accepts his offering and makes yet another bargain with Erebin, and we learn that Sam was currently buried in, quote, a small graveyard by the river's edge, likely meant as an insult to Sam, not realizing Sam wouldn't have wanted to be buried in the keep anyway. She then leaves shortly after, regretting that she had to leave Lysandra with Erebin. Aelin also hopes that Chaol and Nezrin would realize precisely how stupid they'd been entrusting a man like Erebin Hamel. Even if Erebin's gift was the reason they were now able to track the Valg back to wherever they were squatting, she just hoped they at least understood that she should have killed Dorian that day. Unfortunately, I don't think that the lesson has been learned. Nezrin might have, but definitely not Chaol at this particular time.
I literally wrote, yeah, you're right.
Yep.
You're right.
So that ends excited, and now we're getting into chapter 25. And I'm excited for your big thoughts. So,
yes, I have many big thoughts.
So, we check in with Elide, who is garnering information about supply wagons from the naively nice cook, but she's interrupted by Detective Astern. Elide observes secret. Astern was a witch with secrets, and secrets made people deadly. This stuck out to me because what secrets? Is there something else we are going to learn about Astern specifically?
Same. I had the exact same thought. This has to be foreshadowing. Maybe it speaks to why Manon demoted her to help her protect whatever secret she's keeping. Maybe she knows something about the 13 or what's going to Morath. Just hold on to that thread because I'm going to weave it into my tapestry, okay?
Oh, but okay.
Secrets.
Astrid steps in to help with the dishes, and we get some interesting information from this interrogation. Astrid first asks why Elide is chained, stating, "What makes you so dangerous?" And then she goes on to state, "Men have always hated and feared our kind. In the wastes, they made machines to break us apart. The fools never realized all they needed to do to torture our kind, to make us beg, was to chain us, keep us tied to the earth." So, of course, this is in reference to, well, partly in reference to the witches getting grounded because of magic being gone. But this also calls back to the note from earlier episodes where Elide could feel the wind speaking to her and how that's a distinctly witchy thing, as you had pointed out. Astrid also observes that Elide was of witchling age, being 18, and that witchlings who were your age at the time when magic fell never had a chance to fly. The power doesn't set in until their first bleeding. At least now they have wyverns, but it's not the same, is it? I wouldn't know, but your uncle does, doesn't he? And I was like, I'm taking this as confirmation that Vernon does in fact know about Elide's witch blood and therefore chained her intentionally as a secondary measure to ensure she couldn't access any magic she might inherently possess.
I think that's fair to say. If he doesn't know for sure, he definitely suspects it. There's some awareness on his level. So I think that's fair to say. This is kind of a weird topic of conversation, but this also seems to imply to me that maybe she actually hasn't started her period yet, and that's why she hasn't felt her witch magic. Astrid says usually when you have your first bleeding, that's when your magic is activated or, whatever. It's not uncommon for people to not start their periods until they're 15 or 16. I know in America, the age gets earlier and earlier, and there's lots of medical and scientific data to support why that is. But in reality, for most of us probably shouldn't have started our periods until like 15 or 16. I digress.
Right.
Anyway, in this world, that seems reasonable. And if she's been mistreated and malnourished, which it definitely seems like she has, then maybe she really hasn't started her period yet. Because being malnourished definitely can affect your development in real life and probably in book life too. So I wonder if she really doesn't know she has magic. And that's kind of what Vernon's waiting for, is basically for her to start her period to see what happens.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. But then even if they did, though, I don't think they would still know anyway because magic is still gone, right? That is an interesting point, though. But also, I'm kind of curious because, well, hold on. I don't know if I'm getting things confused. But Elide mentions how she wraps herself, right?
Yes,
yeah,
she
to
does.
make herself like look flat and make her kind of appear younger than she actually is. Which,
seems a little counteracted.
Not that those things necessarily go hand in hand, but they kind of happen around similar times.
Yeah, totally. Welcome to the Booked on Fantasy podcast, where we debate if a character has or has not hit puberty.
Elide lies to Astrid about having ever heard the wind call for her or tug at her, but Astrid insists she would, stating anyone with iron teeth blood does. I'm surprised your mother never told you. It's passed on through the maternal line. And I was like, we definitely talked about this. And now we have that confirmation, and it feels very good.
Oh, I'm not going to lie. I was giddy when I read this. I was like, I knew that wind shit from last episode was witchy as hell. I fucking would.
I am curious again as to how different Iron Teeth are from Krokens, especially combined with the Kroken witch's words about the Iron Teeth ones being made to be cruel and bloodthirsty. I'm just trying to figure out how they can distinguish what kind of witch she really is. Speaking
short
about
of the
like,
blood
how do they
thing.
know? Yeah, how do they really know who's who or what's what?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thought. Assuming she's an Iron Teeth witch, she is living proof that they don't have to be cruel and vicious, and it proves the counterfactual that Manon and the others were made to be that way. And so I do think that's interesting when you consider Elide as an Iron Teeth witch compared to the others.
Yeah. Elide is also shocked by this, and her mother had never told her anything before she died, but she does think if there was ancestry, it was so old that it had been forgotten. And then she trails off. So the other thing about this quote is that it confirmed that Lady Marianne does indeed have some witch blood in her. We don't know how
totally.
much or how it came to be there, but Lady Marianne was a witch too,
Apparently.
as we speculated before. Elide limps out of the kitchen, but continues to think about what Astrid had said, which leads her to worry about whether Vernon intended to give her to the Valg to breed with, considering how close he'd gotten with Duke Parrington.
Yeah, this is highly concerning considering Elide's point that the moment Vernon heard about this, he rushed them to Morath. So in conjunction, you're like, ooh, the math is mathin' and it ain't a good number.
No, it makes you very concerned about Elide's fate and why she was brought there. Elide realizes she'd need money to go much farther than she originally planned, so she decides that the best course of action would be to steal from Manon Blackbeak.
Girl. Okay, that is a bad plan.
People. I was like,
plan.
Manon? What?
I know.
God. She's bold, though.
I think it's mostly a crime of opportunity, right? She's true Manonzer, but I'm just like, wow, you're either really stupid or really brave, which I actually think may be exactly what Astrid says. Either you're a moron or you're brilliant or brave.
Right. Unfortunately, obviously, Astrid catches her in the act, and Elide begs, stating that if I have your blood, I can't let him, Vernon, use me like that, and is definitely in denial about the truth that she has learned about herself. Astrid tells her everybody is something, even the most common witch was her coven, but who has your back, Elide Locken? This was interesting to me because it seems Astrid, as intimidating as she is, was ultimately concerned with Elide's safety. Astrid, as we've seen, has been staunchly opposed to letting the Blackbeaks be used by the Valg, but she also fiercely protects witchhood in general. And I love that Astrid is trying to get Elide to accept her lineage so that she can be protected, and that she doesn't really care that Elide may only have a little bit of witch blood. She seems to view that any witch is a witch in her eyes and that they should be under their protection. It's then that Manon interrupts them to demand an immediate explanation. Manon reflects on her already shitty day, which included the start of the implantation experiment on the Yellowlegs clan, getting her ass kicked in training by Sorrel, breaking apart 3 different fights, and having to endure the Blue Bloods telling her it was their divine duty not just to go through with the implantation, but also to go so far as to physically mate with the Valg.
This is concerning to hear. Not gonna lie, I read that and I was like, what? But I did think about it a little bit. Given that they are descendants of the Valg, I guess it makes sense why they might feel that way, right? In their minds, that's their ancestors, or that's where they're descended from. So they don't have this innate hatred of the Valg and what they represent. So I can kind of see why they're like, I don't know. It's gross. Okay, it's gross. I don't like it.
It is really weird. I'm just even confused about the logistics of that. Like, how would they even fully mate with the Valg? The Valg themselves are like an energy force that don't have their own form. So they have to use magical beings, bodies.
Well, can they?
So,
wow, we're about to get weird in this podcast. If you have sex with someone who is infected by a Valg, are you mating with a Valg? I mean, to really
STV,
go there, how did the Valg mate with the Fae? Yeah, how did the Valg mate with the Fae way back when? What were the mechanics of that?
Yeah. See, it opens up so many doors of questions. Because literally they have to embody like a human or like demi-fae or a magical being's body to give them a form. So they control the human, but they're not actually like, what are you having sex with, like a cloud?
A dark, dirty cloud. I know what you mean, but I think that might be the craziest thing you've ever said.
This whole experiment, I am deeming it an STV. If it's successful, the implanted Yellowlegs they've gotten an STV, a sexually transmitted Valg.
I can't. Oh my God.
Yeah, sorry guys.
I
It's
don't
late
like
and
this.
it's getting
I don't
weird. So
I don't like what's happening. I mean, like, not
no,
just like
these
this
are the hard
conversation,
questions.
but like, I don't like what's happening in Morath. I'm not liking the trend of how things are going. I'm feeling really uneasy right now.
It's not great. Yeah. Hard questions. We do talk about them on this podcast.
Can you fuck a cloud? I don't know. You tell me.
At this point, though, the Blackbeaks are the only ones who seem to be resisting the experiment. And I wonder if the other witches are fine with this because they just believe it's going to give them more power. Like the yellow legs and the blue bloods, they just, I don't know.
I don't know either.
After this, Manon had to deal with a human being all up in her space again, referring to Elide. And Astrid jumps in to defend Elide to state she wasn't Vernon's spy before disclosing what they had talked about. Manon and Astrid get into another disagreement over whether Elide was their responsibility or not. Manon thinks Elide was more human than witch and therefore not their responsibility to help, while Astrid believes she is still just as much a witch as anyone else, and was also barely past being a witchling. And that, I think, really translates to the fact that they, as we just talked about, really don't know how powerful Elide might be because A, magic was gone, and B, Elide's power would just now be developing. So this does make me feel pretty confident that Elide is likely going to, honestly, I feel like have a good degree of power.
I think so too.
I feel like
agree.
this
I think
conversation
we're being
is
primed for that.
foreshadow.
Oh, absolutely. A little bit, there's this element of like, when we back up, why else would Elide be important?
Yeah.
Why else are we being introduced to a character? Why have we been primed to think about her for so long if she's not going to be significant in some way?
Yes.
I also feel like there's some contradictory statements because Manon notes that the witch blood flows strong in her veins. Right after that scene with Manon and Abraxas and Elide in the area, Manon thinks she had no idea that witch blood flowed strong in her mortal veins. But here she's saying it's only a drop. So Manon herself is contradicting internal thoughts she's had about the strength, quote unquote, of Elide's witch blood. I think that she's just saying this to be combative to Astrid, and maybe in a way is trying to draw attention away from that. And it was like, Astrid, shut your mouth. You don't need to know that she actually has strong witch blood, right? So I did think that that contradiction was interesting because when she said that she only has a drop, I'm like, I swear I've read the words strong amount of witch blood and something about that isn't sitting right. So, and that is confirmed. I did search that in the ebook.
Even if Manon knows that Elide has witch blood and has a lot of witch blood, I think in her brain she feels like Elide's too human. The way that she behaves, the way that she thinks is way too human, which actually does play into the whole, are Iron Teeth witches made to be that way or are they not, right? So after this, Astrid doesn't back down from Manon stating, and yet you tolerate a wyvern who sniffs flowers and makes puppy eyes at this girl. And then Manon just yanks Elide out of the room instead.
God, I love Astrid. I love her. She is not wrong. I was like, you good. You call her out because that's true as hell. Okay, that is true as hell.
So once alone, Manon's tone changes, and she not only lets Elide keep the coins, but also advises her to save it for when she actually got out of Morath.
Okay.
And I see you have some big thoughts. So
this is where I went a little crazy. This is my first like, ooh, connection. Okay. So I think the thought is sparked when Manon leaves the room and immediately changes her tone. And she's like, come on, Elide, I'll protect you, basically. It makes me suspicious. And let me just like break it down. I think that Manon and Astrid are up to something together.
Oh.
I think they plan to have a fake fight so people would think that there's division between them and that they're keeping up the charade for show. Now, for what purpose, I'm not sure exactly, but I did try to break it down. So think about it this way. Astrid and Manon have been loyal to each other for quite literally decades. Astrid has always been who she is, okay? And so has Manon. They're used to each other's bullshit and the dynamic between them. So why would Manon all of a sudden now start punishing Astrid for just being who she is and who she's always been? And Astrid has been Manon's second for decades, right? Nothing about their situation has changed. So it seems really odd that all of a sudden now Manon's punishing Astrid for the way that they've existed for decades. my third sort of evidence to support that is Manon is fucking vicious. She has no problem killing and or punishing people. If she was truly, truly that unhappy with Astrid and what she was doing, she would kill her or punish her more physically instead of just giving her the cold shoulder and demoting her. So I think that this whole demoting, coldness, putting distance between them was plotted and planned between the two of them. If I had to guess, I would say they're putting distance between themselves so that Astrid can spy and get info either from the staff or, hell, even the Duke. If the Duke or Vernon catch wind that there is a division among the 13, they might think that they can leverage the conflict to their advantage and manipulate Astrid against Manon. So they may start giving Astrid information. So essentially, Astrid is playing a double agent. I feel that this is further bolstered by Elide's thought earlier that Astrid is a woman of mystery and secrets. And I think that may have been the beginning seeds of foreshadowing that everything that's happening with Manon and Astrid in the 13, it isn't making sense and how they behaved prior. And so that is my big witch Astrid idea. And so honestly, if this doesn't turn out to be true, I'm going to be really disappointed because I thought so much about this. I kind of convinced myself it's canon. So I actually think they're fake fighting. So if it turns out this is real, I'm going to be real disappointed. Real disappointed.
Okay, so actually, I do like this whole idea of playing double agent. I think if that's true, it would be a really good plan.
Right?
Because get all the info, figure out the plays. Yes, I like that. I hadn't thought about it that way. I just get the sense that there's something with Astrid's past that is making her so... She has like a hyper focus on the witchling situation and just protecting the integrity of the witches. And I feel like there's something about Astrid's past, and that is what maybe Elide's comment was foreshadowing to about the mystery and the secrets, etc. Is that there's something we don't know yet about Astrid that's causing her to care so much about this particular situation. But then the way that it reads to me right now is that Manon's more concerned about just keeping order within the Blackbeaks, and she also has to contend with the power dynamics with Granny. So it's just like complicated on her end because she's trying to play politics, but she's also trying to like figure out what the fuck is going on. So there's a lot happening. I still feel like we need more information, but I do really like this idea that it could be a ploy. And
I know.
Maybe they're just playing everybody.
I know. That's what I think.
That would be pretty genius. That would be really genius if that's true.
And it would be genius to do it in writing. And if I figured that out this early in the game, oh my God, I'm going to give myself a medal. I'm going to give myself a little sweet treat. I'm going to do something.
I was about to be like, a medal? You don't want a sweet treat?
I want a sweet
I would
treat.
get a sweet treat. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So after this, they do make it to Elide's closet of a room where freaking sneaky snake Vernon Locken was already waiting. So it's clear that Vernon is attempting to see what's been happening between the witches and Elide, which aligns with Elide's speculation that perhaps Vernon was waiting for one of you to confirm what I am.
I really want to know what game Vernon is playing.
Yes.
We just don't know enough truly to actually speculate on that. But I will say, I think we should go ahead and add Vernon to our baddie bad list. He's gross.
Yes.
He's gross. You know, one of our listeners sent us a text and was just like, I'm really sorry to tell you, but your baddie bad list is going to keep growing. And I remember reading that. And I'm like, dude, how much bigger can it be? We already had like Maeve, the King, the Duke. And I'm like, damn, they were right. Fucking
So
Amity.
right, yeah.
I mean, who else? You know, so they were right. And I don't think it's going to get better for a while. So,
oh, no, absolutely not.
He's just so awful to me, especially when Elide is talking about how he watched his own brother being executed while smiling and then came back to tell Elide all about it. Elide was like 8 years old. And that is sick. That is just, it's horrible. I can't even get over for how horrible it is. It's horrible.
Well, that's why I keep wondering if, like, has Vernon been being influenced somehow? Or is he really just, like, a power-hungry a sneaky snake.
I think he's really just a piece of shit. I think he always has been.
Yeah.
I think he's always been jealous of his brother and his titles and his life, and he saw an opportunity and he took it.
Well, he's making deals with the devil because I don't think aligning with the Duke is going to get him very far.
No, definitely not.
I get very bad vibes from him. I do not like him. So I will happily put him on our baddie bad list.
Sounds good.
Vernon goes on to ask if she was aligning herself with the witches now, but Elide responds there is nothing to ally against Uncle, and Vernon's response was, perhaps I kept you too sheltered for all those years, if you believe that's so. And I did find that kind of weird. What is that supposed to mean, Vernon? It's pretty clear he knows more than he is saying, plus he has aligned himself with the Duke and the King, who are infected with the Valg. But as we've just discussed, I'm just confused by his motivations. I just don't understand what he would have against Terrason that would cause him to turn a 180 and like work for the King now. I don't know. He's a snivelly weasel. Am I saying that right? Is it snivelly or snively?
Nope, it's snivelly. It's snivelly. Good job. Well, since you didn't spell it right, I don't know how to spell snivelly. But I remember in Harry Potter, I think they called him like Snivelly Severus Snape.
Yeah,
Like Snivelly Snape or something like that. Yeah.
Snivelly Snape.
Snivelly Snape. I'm a snake. Remember that? Do you remember that old? I'm a snake.
I'm a snake.
Slithery little snake. Oh my God. Okay, we're getting crazy.
Okay, anyways. To continue, Vernon reminds Elide that today was the day Chaol, whom he refers to as a traitor to the King, had died. Luckily, Manon dismisses him before he can do any more damage. Perhaps this most significant event is when Manon offers Elide a choice stating you can choose witchling, blue or red. You decide. If it runs blue, it turns out I have jurisdiction over you. If your blood runs red, well, I don't particularly care about humans. So this does bring up, once again, the idea that the witches are made to be a certain way. And I think it's really symbolically significant that Manon acknowledges Elide can choose who she wants to be. I do think this aligns with what Manon has been thinking about herself as well. I hope she continues to consider what that means. Elide is hesitant about accepting her witch blood, realizing that this was a trap and she was bait for Vernon. Ultimately, she figures it would be good for her to learn a thing or two about what it was like to have fangs and claws and how to use them. So she chooses blue. And I was like, yeah! I'm so excited by this.
Blue.
And even more pumped to see how Elide evolves and grows with this new identity. I especially love that despite the fear Elide feels, she also immediately feels a sense of belonging because Elide has been alone without a home for the past 10 years. And given her uncle is a traitor to Terrason, she's been pretty much under constant threat without the protection of a larger group or like a nation to really belong to. But now that she has learned and accepted her witch lineage, a new kind of family is available to her. And I'm very excited to see where this leads her.
Yeah, I feel like her possibilities are really open right now. I feel like you could go a lot of directions with her storyline. I know I keep saying this. I'm really curious to see how she weaves into the story at large.
So that ends chapter 25. Moving on to chapter 26.
So I did have an overarching thought for this chapter specifically. I'm starting to find some of the thoughts that they're having about each other to be odd. And that's a nice way to put it. Okay. I know we talked about this earlier in the episode, but this is like where I had a lot of evidence. I'm not going to call it creepy yet, but it's weird to me. For example, Aedion's thought, but he angled his face away from the smoke, breathing in another better smell, and found the source of it frowning up at him. Aelin's exquisite scent soothed and awakened him. He'd never get sick of that scent. It was a miracle. And I have met a lot of really good smelling people, but never have I been like, the way you smell is a miracle. Okay.
Exquisite.
Exquisite. My own husband, who is like the most thoughtful with his words of affirmation kind of person, has never told me that. And if he did, I would be like, are you okay? Like, what happened?
Yeah,
Did you hit your head? That's fucking weird. Then, okay, it's weird for like a normal couple. And then imagine saying that to your cousin. thinking that about your cousin, okay? It's getting real. You know what I mean?
I know, yeah.
Backcountry shit.
Maybe we have some biases as humans out here, and we don't know whether
that's weird. It's
cousin interactions are
nope. They begin and end in a very clear place, okay? I know that we have talked about the dynamic of the relationship before and how it's intense, to say the least. But if there's not romantic love between them, then this thought is weird as fuck. It's kind of weird even if there is romantic love. Also, another piece of evidence to support this, later when he is thinking about how she made a deal with Arabin to save him, he gets upset and he thinks, how many scars would she add to that lithe, powerful body because of him?
That was such a weird comment. I was like, why are you commenting about like her
body?
Okay. It was really weird.
And I did not know what lithe meant. I had to look it up. But lithe means thin, supple, and graceful. And again, to describe your cousin's body as supple and graceful, it's weird. Okay.
Yeah, it is. It is weird. I 100% agree.
I don't know if I'll ever be able to get past this. Even if they do some, writing fixes later on, I'm going to remember this and it's going to bother me as a flaw in the series. I got to say, this alone is knocking off like half a star for me.
I definitely agree. There's some weird writing going on of how to describe Aedion and Aylin's relationship. So back at Aylin's apartment, Aedion and Aylin walk the rooftop and have another conversation that broaches the topic of where they would head next once Aedion was recovered. He brings up Rowan and he informs Aylin that Rowan was perhaps the greatest warrior alive and that the six of them, we used to tell stories about them around fires, their battles and exploits and adventures. So obviously we knew Rowan was extremely powerful, but it seems he is quite literally the strongest female alive today. And I don't know, that's just crazy. So
yeah, it's crazy too that their paths crossed. Like, what were the odds of that? It does feel a little bit fated in that way. Get that look off your face. I knew it. Even as the words were coming out of my mouth, I was like, oh, God.
Aylin continues being dismissive and jokes not to tell Rowan that, but Aedion, despite wanting to thank Rowan for how he'd helped Aylin, couldn't help but feel competitive over who would get to make the coveted blood oath to Terrason's queen. And I was like, sorry, Aedion, that ship has sailed. But he does not know that yet. So,
yeah, as soon as I read that, I was like, what? Cringing immediately. And it only got worse as we continued on.
Mm-hmm. So as far as world building goes, we do learn that since Brannon had founded Terrason, there's a quote that says its kings and queens had picked only one of their court to swear the blood oath, usually at their coronation or soon after, just one for their entire lives. And Aedion had no interest in yielding that honor even to the legendary warrior prince.
It's important to note that the custom in Wendland has the same symbolic importance. The key difference here is a ruler may offer it whenever they want, but in Terrason, it's only offered to one person. And in Aylin's case, the offering of the bond was offered to Aedion when they were children, basically. Also, I was under the distinct impression that they had already done the blood oath, and that was the justification for their bizarrely intense connection and obsession with each other. But to find out it's only been promised makes it even weirder. Because the way they always talked about it, I assumed that they had already done it. I remember they were like, Aedion was talking about how Ren was always jealous about the blood oath, and I assumed that it was already done. So then reading this, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You haven't even taken the blood oath and you're talking about her exquisite scent? That doesn't sound right to me.
In her lithe body.
In her lithe. Oh, Lorraine, you have such a lithe body and an exquisite scent. Like, what? It's weird.
It is really weird. And that's why I feel like maybe there is something else about Aylin and Aedion's lineage. I don't know. Are they actually like freaking twins or something and just everybody lied to them?
Oh, that'd be a fun twist. Oh my God. That would be a fun twist.
They look exactly alike. They keep talking about how they're mirrors of each other and like all this stuff. So why is it that they are like so close? If I remember correctly, Aylin's like 8 and Aedion's like 13 or something, right? when they were younger.
That's it, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that's a big difference.
Yeah, okay, so that kind of mitigates the twin thing. Damn.
I know. Unless, again, they had been lied to. So, anyways, before they could continue on to Terrasen, they still had to get the Amulet of Orinth from Erebin first. A reminder that has Aedion seething, knowing that the King of Assassins had demanded she put herself in danger, as if her life, as if the fate of their kingdoms, were a God's damned game to him. And I was like, sweet, sweet Aedion. I'm going to move him to my second favorite book boyfriend from the series, behind Dorian. Especially when he thinks, how many scars would she add because of him? And I was like,
my God, see? It's hard not to resist him. He's so sweet.
I know.
And if he really does have the hots for his cousin.
Yeah.
We'll just overlook that. It's fine.
It's going to be like House of the Dragon.
The House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones. I was fine that Jon Snow hooked up with Dany. I'm like, it's cool. He's hot. Yeah. It's fine. If you're hot, you can do whatever you want. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Aelin also confirms that she planned to free Magic, though she wasn't ready to tell him the plan for that yet. And after that, then they would be able to go to Terrasen.
Also, so this is where Addison started keyboard warrioring. I took like half of a page of conversation and I was like, oh my God, this is my TED Talk. So welcome. The conversation between them continues about the logistical challenges they are going to face trying to raise an army and overthrow the King of Ireland. Okay. And the conversation with Aedion did not make me feel good. We've got several problems here. So let me break them down for you and every single thought that popped into my head about them, because I put it on here and I'm going to read it. Okay. Before we get into them, I just want to say first and foremost, I sincerely appreciate the inclusion of real-world logistical problems in war planning. Many authors overlook these because it can be complex to write and even more complex to problem solve within the novel or universe. Also, probably the realism kind of sucks and can take you out of it. It's kind of nice to forget about all that stuff and just think about the main characters and their small but mighty army taking on the big overpowered army and somehow still triumphing. You know what I mean? This is one reason Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin is so popular, because he included a lot of this type of real world detail, right? How to raise an army, how to feed them, how to transport them, time, resources, etc. So I do appreciate its inclusion here. First and foremost, they have to get to Terrasen before the snow falls, or they're trapped. That puts a lot of pressure on them timeline-wise. I don't know the exact topography of the continent, but I assume there are mountains that they won't be able to pass through once the snow starts to fall. And I think our last update, timeline-wise, was that it's got to be beginning of summer, because that festival that she was supposed to kill her family in Wendlin, I think was like a summer festival. So we're starting to get pretty close to that timeline-wise. The potential upside of this, however, is that it seems like it would make it difficult for the king to get to them. So if they can get to Terrasen and the snow can fall, maybe he won't be able to reach them as easily. The second issue is apparently what remains of Terrasen's nobility are not super cooperative and helpful. Aedion notes that he has Aelin write letters to them, basically giving them orders, and he thinks he knew the remaining lords, the old cunning bastards, wouldn't appreciate orders like that, even from their queen, but he had to try. This does not fill me with hope and confidence at their willingness to do anything helpful. It also reminds me of the conversation Murtaugh had with Aedion earlier in the series, that people may not necessarily be super eager to fall in line behind Aelin because they'll want her to account for what she was doing the last 10 fucking years. Okay? That's issue number 2. Number 3, besides those two things, they have an even larger problem. They're going to need money for an army. Even if they agree to fight on their honor alone, they stand a better chance at bigger numbers if they can pay them, not to mention they need to feed them, arm them, clothe them, and in general supply them, okay? Aedion sort of thinks through some of the solutions, and this is where I'm getting to my big idea, okay? It's probably not that big. I probably built it up too much. I do that a lot. Okay. Some solutions to this would be to raise taxes, but Aelin doesn't want to do that for obvious reasons, not to mention the people would need to have money in the first place to pay the taxes, and everyone in Terrasen's broke because the king has controlled them via basically cutting off all avenues for them to make any money. They could get a loan from another nation to fund the war. This presents several challenges, which I will point out. First and foremost, Elide points out she doesn't want to whore Terrasen out to another nation. Not to mention, they would have to find a country that, one, has enough money to loan them, two, would be willing to loan them, and who would want to risk the wrath of the king of Aedion, and three, which likely means they would have to go farther away from Aurelia, but that takes time to travel and negotiate. Aelin herself wouldn't be able to go, which means they'd be using an emissary, and info could take weeks and weeks and weeks to go back and forth, and so it's a logistical nightmare. So as little money as they have even less time. So this is a real problem for them, right? Because even if they free magic, they need an army. They've got to have an army. So this all led me to my big idea. Okay. I'm so excited. I know, finally. It was like, damn, Addison, took a long time to get there. Okay. What if this is why Aelin keeps going to the bank? Somehow, between what information Wesley gave her and what she knows has figured out, she's going to steal Arobyn's money to finance her army to take back Terrasen. Okay. There are all these descriptions throughout this series about how just obscenely wealthy Aedon is. Lines like, he had enough money to rival most kingdoms, right? Like, he just has untold wealth. And I think she's going to the bank, not only to find the Amulet of Orinth, which I speculated on, I still stand by that, but to take Arobyn's funds. And whatever she's doing there is all part of some plot to not only, get back at Aedon and get the amulet, but to fund her army to Terrasen. And in reality, when you think about it, a lot of that fucking money is hers. We know that fucking 500,000 gold coins are hers. And then however much she paid Sam's debt, I mean, that's basically her money anyway. I think that's why she's going to the bank. And that was my big idea.
Ooh, I really like that. I really like that. And that's what she meant by he would get what's owed to him.
Yes. Oh my God, that language. Yes. And it's why she won't share her plans with anybody, because it's too risky, right? She can't risk anybody even getting a hint of what's going on. And so I just feel this in my bones. Okay, if this doesn't happen, it's canon for me. This is what she's doing. I don't care what actually happens. When all of this came to me, I was like, I look like King Prawn. I look like him. I was like...
Is that enough, though? Do you think just gutting him dry, like taking all his money is enough? Revenge-wise?
Oh, God.
Oh, you think so?
Oh, no, sorry. I thought you meant, like, is it enough to fund the war? Is it enough revenge-wise? No. I think Aelin is going to take everything Aedon holds dear because that's what he did to her. So she's going to take his possessions, his assassins, his money. And then when she's stripped everything away from him, she's going to take his life.
Okay. Ooh, yes. I like this. I like this a lot.
Now I want to stay up and read. I'm like, what's going to happen?
What's going to happen? Yeah.
I told you, a pretty good idea, right?
I like it. I like it a lot.
Oh, me too.
I was trying to remember if she'd ever made the comment about Aedon being one of the men who had taken everything from her in her life, because she makes that about the king. I was like, oh, she did make that? Oh, yeah. Okay, so
when she's recalling her journey from Wendland to Aurelia, and she's talking about how she got the paper and she wrote the plans over and over until she'd worked them out.
Right.
There's a line that's like, to take back or to ruin the two men in Aurelia that had ruined her life again and again, or something like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So this would be really fitting to just like,
she's going to take everything.
Take it all. Yep. All right. So next, Aedion attempts to bring up the blood oath again. Aelin seems surprised he still wants to swear it to her, but they are interrupted by Chaol, who informs them the shadow market and the people inside had been burned. Apparently, the king had learned that the rebels who freed Aedion were meeting in the shadow market to buy supplies.
Once again, internally screaming, cringing, secondhand embarrassment. Every time Aedion brings up the blood oath, I feel like it's going to get ugly when Aedion finds out that Rowan took it. Every time it got mentioned, I was just like, send help, please. Make this stop.
The tone of Chaol's information starts another fight between them as they argue over who was to blame for the king's latest actions.
Okay, listen, before we get into this, we're not going to go all crazy because it's the same argument we have all the time. I'm always a Chaol defender, but Lorraine, I feel like you have to agree that it is likely, based on this information, the king destroyed the shadow market and specifically used fire as a way to send a message to Aelin that the attack was 100% a message for her and done in retaliation for Aedion. I mean, you have to agree to that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Now, I'm not saying, I mean, in a way it is kind of her fault, but obviously not at all because it's the king's action, it's his retaliation. But I do feel like Chaol is right here. He's like, why do you think he burned the shadow market down? It's because of what you did. I feel like we just all kind of have to agree on that.
Yeah, I agree that it's a message. That's true. But the king is going to do what the king's going to do regardless. I kind of feel like he was probably waiting. I mean, he already knew Aelin was going to try and do that. So he was just like looking for excuses to enact things that he was probably going to do anyway. So that was, anyways.
Chaol's right in the logical thought, but wrong in the emotional.
Yes, yeah. So this time, Chaol believes Aelin finds the city of Rifthold and its citizens expendable given her lack of progress on the clock tower and the lives that had been lost rescuing Aedion.
To be honest, this is a little much. What did he expect Aelin to do? Did he think she was going to rent a bulldozer and level it? Like, what? He hasn't done anything to knock it down. Even I was like, bro, what's wrong with you? He's just raging, okay? Like, he's just rage.
Yeah.
I do understand his impatience and being upset. He's not wrong. She did risk everything and multiple lives just to get one man, Aedion, out. But I also feel like he's just being irrational here. He's not wrong, but also he's off base on a lot of emotional parts of this. So,
right. And that's like, Chaol, I think you got to put all this energy into like looking for a solution as well instead of just being angry.
Find a girlfriend or something. God, do something different because what you're doing right now isn't working.
Aelin reminds Chaol that he had done nothing about the slaves in Endovir and that many people in the city have profited off the blood and misery of the very people he ignored. Basically, A, they need to free magic, and B, innocent people need to be spared as much as possible. I think war is pretty much inevitable at this point. It's too far escalated, so their attention probably needs to be spent on destroying the Valg with as little unnecessary destruction as possible. But the debate, per usual, is always about where the line is for necessary destruction.
Yeah, do the ends justify the means? I will say her argument here is reasonable and correct, right? Her response to this is true. Like, Chaol ignored these things, but she's not actually addressing what Chaol has said. She's just misdirecting to a truth, but is not relevant. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. It's dumb. They're both dumb. They're stupid.
Yeah.
I will say it doesn't help when she says shit like, maybe the city should burn or maybe the world should burn.
Yeah.
I mean, they even call it out that she's doing that just to agitate him. But I'm like, quit fucking saying shit like that to him. Like, he is already kind of triggered. Maybe don't say the exact thing he's worried about, you know? Like,
yeah. That's true. Aedion intervenes to tell Chaol, you want to pick a fight, you come to me, not to her. But he can't help but think he'd hated the city from the very first time he'd spotted the white walls, the glass castle. So everything about the situation is just hard. I think Rifthold in particular strikes a chord because the city's most affluent and powerful benefit from the oppression of other groups and slave labor. But the distinction that not everyone in Rifthold is like that is very important to remember. The city's most vulnerable, the regular and middle to lower class folks are totally uninvolved and have basically no power over what's happening. So to condemn an entire city of people is also not the best course of action either. The conversation shifts to if anything had been learned about Dorian. Chaol's primary concern, as usual, remains focused on saving him, especially now that the rebels were thinking of abandoning Rifthold to establish themselves in other cities in case the Valg spread. Which, now that that's been mentioned, that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
Aedion can only say there was no sign of the man inside him, but he apologizes and realizes that Aelin planned for this conversation to take place between them. They briefly discuss alternative leaders for Otterlin, but ultimately Aedion says, "We're not enemies. You can trust us. Trust Aelin." And Chaol responds, "No, I can't. Not anymore." I really don't know what Chaol plans to do. He is not going to win this, like, running around on his own. But it seems like they may be going in separate ways for at least a while, since he's unable to forgive Aelin for decisions he's made. So what are you going to do, Chaol? Like,
he's just in like a rage shame spiral. He cannot rationalize or make logical decisions. Truly, he really can't.
Back out on the streets, Chaol snaps at Nesrin to say, "Just because we work together doesn't mean you're entitled to know everything that goes on in my life."
Rude.
Sassy Chaol. Just lashing out. Nesrin vanishes without another word. And I was like, "Chaol, you really need to go to therapy, okay?" It seems like something you need right now. But on a serious note, Chaol thinks at least he couldn't hate himself any more than he already did. So this is where I had my little epiphany about how the experiences of the cycle that Aelin went through and now the emotional cycle that Chaol is going through kind of hit me. I'm just waiting for Chaol to realize that so that they can stop pointing fingers and playing the blame game.
Yeah. Mostly that very short section of the chapter just really made me realize his self-loathing is just off the charts. It's unchartable. Yeah. It's actually really sad. It's really sad when you think about what Chaol's been through and how his sense of purpose and self have really been decimated. You can sort of see why he's just, as I said earlier, in a spiral of shame and rage. So,
right.
Poor Chaol.
I know. Ugh. We change to Aelin's perspective, who A, feels guilty for lying to Aedion about the Blood Oath situation, and B, blames herself for what happened to the Shadow Market. To blow off some of her anger, she tracks several patrols of guards to gather information. She'd hoped she would learn something valuable she could give to Chaol to prove how invested she was in the welfare of this piss-poor city.
Welfare of the piss-poor city.
Piss-poor city. Our lovely typos on her outline.
Oh my god.
I really don't think that Aelin doesn't care about Rifthold. I think she just feels the city has been too corrupted by the powerful, and the only way to restore it is to rebuild it from the ground up. I think at this point, she has accepted that this will involve a lot of loss of life across all fronts, but she believes that is worth it if a better system for leadership and just how Otterlin operates can be formed. But of course, none of this really is being communicated to other parties. So she follows one Val commander in particular down into the tunnels until it stops at a massive pool where she sees a creature emerge from the water. Dun, dun, dun!
Dun, dun, dun!
And that moves us into chapter 27 next, our final chapter. To everyone's absolute horror, the serpentine-snouted creature was one of the 8 creatures carved into the clock tower itself. 8 gargoyles that she'd once sworn had watched her.
And smiled at her. Yes. In like a creepy way, not in a nice way. Like the creepy way. Aelin, as she's having this epiphany, poses a question in her internal thoughts. Do you think that this is actually one of the horrible gargoyle clock tower creatures brought to life? Or those gargoyles were molded in the likeness of a horrible creature that lived? What do you think?
Well, at this point, we don't even know what else is being constructed, but clearly the king is working on some stuff. Plus the Valg, I don't know what else exists in the realm. So I would not be surprised if this is the real creature that still exists and now it has form and access in the world that they're currently in.
So you think the clock tower gargoyles were based off of real life creatures, and this is one of those real life creatures?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I have really no evidence to support this. I feel like it's a gargoyle creature brought to life. So if you were to go to the clock tower right now, that creature would be missing from the clock tower. I don't have the evidence to support it. Between the two, I don't know why.
Yeah. Wait. Yeah, wait.
So there's two options. The first is it's the actual gargoyle creature was brought to life and is missing from the clock tower. The other option is this horrible creature existed and the king somehow brought it back or whatever, called it to Aurelia, and the gargoyles on the clock tower are just statues modeled after the real life creature. So I was asking if you think it's a gargoyle brought to life, or you think it's a creature that obviously exists and the gargoyles in the clock tower were modeled after it.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know anymore. I still feel like there's something wonky going on with those clock tower creatures or the gargoyles on the clock tower, like as a statue. But I don't know if they're necessarily the same thing that the king has taken form of right now. Or I guess whatever. Okay, you know what? Scratch what I said. I still stand by what I said in the first place, I think, in that case. So I just have a lot of questions about them. What is the purpose of these gargoyle creatures? Are they tied to the clock tower? Are they just spies that the king can now use to go out to places? And also, why take the form of this gargoyle in the first place? Is it because the gargoyle specifically has the ability, like this creature of some sort or whatever's going on, can go through? I don't know how the king got there, whether it's like he just conjured up a little portal and
he's piloting the body.
Yeah, I don't know what their term is for something like that in this world, but something similar to that. So the eye of Celaena pulses in warning, but Aelin smothers the light to listen to the conversation. She decided she would call the creature a word hound, but we learn a few things. First, the king's patrols had fallen for Erebin's fake escape party heading down the southern road towards Fenharrow. Second, Aelin recognizes the voice as the king's. And my only thought, quite literally, was, what the fuck?
Oh, you look like King Prawn. You were like, what? Guys, you're going to have to look this up so you know what the fuck we're talking about the rest of this episode. Well, I guess the episode's almost over, but if you're not convinced to look it up at this point, I don't know what to do.
It's so funny. But I guess this is just another power that the Valg have. Again, I don't know what the term is for what the king is doing and how he's like projecting and embodying this word hound in the first place, but clearly it's something else they can do. Recognizing how dangerous the situation was, Aelin decided she'd still give Erebin a Valg commander and let Chaol and Nesryn hunt them down, but not until she spoke to one on her own first. Back at the apartment, an impatient Aedion worries over her being 2 hours later than expected. They have a brief argument over Aedion wanting to know what she was doing, and Aelin stating he wasn't entitled to information about everything she did. It becomes clear they both have an equal penchant for stubbornness and temper. And there's a quote that said they'd been cut from the same cloth. I do agree with Aedion on this one. The last thing we need is another Sam incident. Plus, Aelin is too important and needs to be guarded. Aedion may not necessarily have to go with her everywhere, but I do think he should know in case anything happens.
Oh, yeah. I mostly agree, but I will say it is tricky because sharing her plans makes her vulnerable, but not sharing them also makes her vulnerable.
True.
And so that's a really tricky line to walk. And
yeah.
I don't know, sometimes I'm like, yeah, Aedion doesn't need to know everything. And then other times I'm like, yeah, he kind of does. But also she can't have Aedion charging through the streets of Rifthold because she's 20 minutes late. So it's really, that's a lose-lose.
The argument devolves into a heart-to-heart, and they exchange more stories about the awful things they'd endured to earn the scars they carried with themselves forever. And again, this was just more weird stuff being too intimate for whatever reason. They're shirtless,
cute, though.
Showing each other. I don't know. Just in the context of their other conversations, I was again like, this feels way too intimate. I don't know. Anyways.
What I took away from that, though, is yet again, Aelin is making more jokes about how freaking giant Aedion is. She thinks Aedion came around the couch to sit beside her. He took up nearly half of the damn thing. And then my personal favorite was he slumped onto the couch. He was large enough that she was nearly popped off her own cushion. And then she tells him not to break her couch and calls him a hulking brute. And I'm like, how big is this man? Like, how tall is he? Is he like a 7-footer? You know, like, Jesus Christ. I don't know. It cracks me up every time.
I really am imagining him like Beauty and the Beast size. Like
just
Aedion
huge.
is the beast. And
I'm going to look it up.
Aelin is Belle-sized.
Is Aedion Ashever.
What?
He's only 6 feet and 3 inches. Boom.
Wait, when does it say that?
I don't know. I feel like a lot of Sarah J. Maas's books, the main male leads, you can like Google all of their heights.
They just make them up.
It says Aedion stands a towering height of 6 feet and 3 inches, is heavily muscled, complemented by his striking features and sun-kissed complexion.
Okay, so then how tall is Aelin? In my brain, I'm like,
she's like,
I'm 5'7", so I'm like, oh, maybe I'm 5'7".
In finance, 6'5". Blue eyes. Okay, let me see. How tall is Aelin Galathius? 5'7". Okay, so she's tall.
Oh my
God.
Okay, so it's just like my height.
Okay, when you Google the description, it says, standing at 5'7", Aelin's body is lithe and toned. Nevertheless, she is blessed with impressive curves and well-formed breasts. She has many scars, including those on her back, which she received from the whips during her time in the salt mines of Endovier. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Maybe Aedion's just really like muscular. He's just got like thicker limbs, you know?
He's thick. But she's always just talking about that he's like basically a giant. And I'm just like, damn.
Yeah, it's really funny. Okay. 2 days later, Aedion paces around restlessly when Aelin returns and finally concedes to let him take a walk outside. On the street, they meet Nesrin, who had arrived to deliver a report. They offer to have her join them, with Aedion joking, "What I want is a pretty face that doesn't belong to my cousin. Looks like you'll do the trick." And Aelin saying, I don't know. That's what he says. Aelin says, "I hate to tell you, cousin, but the captain wouldn't be very pleased if he made a move on fully." Nesrin protesting, "It's not like that. I think he's content to be miserable. We could die any day, any hour. I don't see a point in rooting." So I do think this was a pretty good point, and I agree with Nesrin. But in Chaol's minor defense, Nesrin is not personally tied to what is going on, so her concern is more about the general cause, with which Chaol, of course, is personally invested because Dorian is in danger. So he's stressing. He's not having a good time. No one is, but especially Chaol. They proceed to a degenerate tavern where Nesrin beat them round after round in cards, and they learned about her family and life. As they meandered the alleys, not ready to sleep yet, Aedion savors every step of his freedom.
So there's a thought here from Aedion that I thought was really interesting, and it just screamed to me, there's a story here. He thinks he'd been locked in that cell for weeks. It had hit an old wound, one he hadn't spoken about to Aelin or anyone else, though his highest-ranking warriors in the Bane knew, if only because they'd helped him exact his revenge years after the fact. And I want to know what he is talking about, okay? When I read that, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So clearly that implies he was captured, probably imprisoned or in some way constrained, and his freedom was taken away from him. And of course, it seems like obviously he escaped and then got his revenge years later. And so I want to know what the story is there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Suddenly, Aedion picks up on the scrape of boots and a male scent of pine and snow. And then next, he smells Aelin on the stranger. The scent, complex and layered, woven into the male. And surprise, it's Rowan!
Woo!
And obviously, just pointing out how Aedion can smell Aelin's scent mixed with Rowan's just as strongly as it is the other way. So,
but they're carrying
it's
on.
Like, true. Yes, I know. Aside from that, though, I was just very surprised because was not expecting to see him in Rifthold so soon.
Yeah.
But then also, I obviously want to know what prompted his arrival and how he found her. So
yeah, that's a good question. I pretty much thought all the same things, except for the fact I don't think they're mates. And most importantly, Ratty's home, everybody. Ratty's home.
Ew. Wait, can we call them Raylan?
That really sounds like Raylan. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds real country. You know what I mean?
Raylan.
Raylan.
I know, but I can't go.
Eowyn.
I can't go. Eowyn. That sounds worse.
I'll have to work on it.
Raylan.
Raylan.
Who's the way you said it?
Well, because I don't know why my brain works that way, but as soon as you said that, I was like, Raylan. Like, you know, like, I don't know. Little Raylan.
Oh my god. Okay.
Man.
Anyways, guys, that ends our analysis. Now we just have our favorite moments to share, and then we're gonna go to bed. So
yeah.
One of the first ones, and this was a shared one between us, was the quote where it said, "Stop feeling sorry for yourself, stay the course, but also plot." Another one, "Adapt." That was from Nesrin to Chaol. Yeah.
Thanks, Nesrin. Thank you. Somebody had to say it. I like when Aedion and Aelin are first reunited, and Aedion says, "Thank you for your spectacular rescue. Let's never do it again." I'm like, yes, agreed.
My next one that I liked was when Nesrin also tells Chaol, "Dorian Haviliard offers a better future, but the responsibility also lies with us, with how common people choose to act."
On a similar, more somber note, not flowers, never flowers in Terrasen. Instead, they carried small stones to graves to mark their visits, to tell the dead that they remembered. Stones were eternal, flowers were not. I know.
Sad.
I might start doing that for my own loved and lost.
I like that a lot.
Me too.
Yeah,
I was like, I may adopt that into my own personal life.
Mm-hmm.
What?
I just had this intrusive thought.
Oh God. Do I want to know? I'm scared.
Of you like walking into a grave and then just pulling out some rocks out of your pocket.
I can see why to others they would be like, they're too cheap to buy flowers. You know what I mean? Like, no, but okay, like for all of our listeners that have children, you know that kids are obsessed with rocks. Pretty rocks, ugly rocks, dirty rocks, shiny rocks, clean rocks, colorful rocks, normal rocks, pieces of concrete that have broken off from the curb that look like rocks. Literally, my oldest child, the entire last year of school, she brought home my husband pieces of the curb that had been painted red, like for the fire lane, because his favorite color was red. And she was like, "Daddy, I brought you this red rock," which was so cute. It was so cute. But she was literally bringing him pieces of concrete, you know? And like, I remember one day I took her to the playground behind the school and she was like, "Mommy, this is where I get all the red rocks for Daddy." And it was like this broken smash piece of She's like, "When we go back inside, I bent down, I put one in my pocket." And it was just like the sweetest thing. But I'm like, oh my God, kids are obsessed with rocks. I just cleaned out my freezer. I found like half a dozen acorns, 4 or 5 rocks, a bag of twigs.
The freezer? Mm-hmm. That's where you stored them?
No, I didn't put them there. Jesus, no. My children put them there because, you know, they're like, "I'm going to save these for the squirrels for later. You know, this bag of twigs, I'm going to build a nest." And I don't know why they put them in the freezer. I think because I'm like, "Oh, I put it in the freezer, you know, it'll last longer." I don't know. Kids are weird, okay? They're adorable, but they're weird.
So funny, yeah.
Anyway, well, okay, on a different note, on a more silly note, I like when Manon, she's talking to Vernon, and Vernon says, "Careful, wing leader. You know precisely where your power ends." Manon shrugged. "I also know precisely where to bite."
Get him. My next one that I really liked was a serious one from Aedion. And he says, "Whatever you had to do to survive, whatever you did from spite or rage or selfishness, I don't give a damn. You're here and you're perfect. You always were and you always will be." Aww.
And that's why I'm in love with you, cousin. I'm sorry. It's ruined.
And so is Addison.
I'm ruined. Yes, my book boyfriend can't be in love with his cousin.
Aedion. Really throws a wrench.
I was really going for all the funny ones this time. I like when Aedion is thinking about his time in the apartment and he thinks he was still weak enough that until now he'd barely been able to stand long enough to piss. Having Aelin to help him the first time had been awkward enough that he couldn't even go until she started singing a body tune at the top of her lungs and turned on the sink and faucet, all the while helping him stand over the toilet.
Absolutely not. My cousin had to help me and then watch me pee. No.
Listen,
Nope.
Who's going to help him? He's got a urinate.
True.
Okay.
True.
What's he going to do? He can't even stand up.
I don't know. I'm just saying.
Wow. To all our Lorraine's family that's listening, I hope you don't ever need assistance in the bathroom because Lorraine will not be providing that.
Okay. I also had a funny one. My last two were funny. And it was when Manon says, "Good choice, Witchling. Welcome to the Blackbeaks." To the lead. I guess that wasn't funny, but it was inspiring.
Exciting. Yeah, inspired. Yeah. Yes, I like that. Yeah. Yes. I don't ever like to end on like a sad, somber one. So
that's true.
I like Aedion and Aelin, their banter when they're trading stories about their scars. And I just really overall enjoyed that whole scene and how they teased each other. But specifically when Aedion says, "I didn't know you were so bad at cards, you had to resort to cheating." That's something I would have said.
I could picture it happening too.
Oh, totally.
And then last but not least, I liked when Aedion and Aelin are conversing and she just says, "Has anyone ever taught you humility?" And he responds, "You didn't learn it, so why should I?"
Fair.
Cut from the same cloth. So, okay, that officially concludes our episode. Thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booked on Fantasy podcast. As always, we're so glad you found us. So please leave us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and check out our social media pages to keep up with us on a daily basis, especially if you want to know who King Prawn is. Okay. That's all we've got for you guys today. So stay nerdy.
And remember, you can't be punished for crimes you only commit in your head.
That's right. We'll catch you all next week for Queen of Shadows, episode 5. Bye!
Bye! And stay tuned for many, many bloopers. Let's rage.
Let's ride. I feel like that's from something, but I don't.
We ride, witches. Or we fly. I don't remember. Whatever.
We fly, yeah.
Wait, I have to yawn. I knew I was going to have to yawn.
I put my glasses back on. My blue light glasses today.
They're so cute. I really like them.
Maybe I was meant to be a glasses wearer.
But anyways, so. I'm here for it.
Okay, here we go.
Big yawn. Okay. Big yawn. No, not about this. Just about the time. It's not even that late. I'm just tired. Okay. After Aelin's successful and daring rescue of Aedion. Wait, I forgot to do a comma. Whoops, commas are good. They're our friends. Okay. He reminded Aelin of their boggin. I'm very angry about that. It was very supping. It was very sucking stupid. I can't. Oh my God. It was very fucking stupid. Okay.
Sorry, I had to burp.
Yummy. Manon notes that the witch blood, I wrote, flows strong in her brains. I think I meant to say veins, not brains. Yep. Okay, that's like really funny. That'll be a good blooper.
Next, smelling. I know I wrote pints.
I tried to hold it in as I tried.
I will say I'm pretty good at fixing them on the fly sometimes.
You do.
Not
you
all
do
the time,
it.
But